John Evans. Welcome to another episode of One on One. Larry the Cable Guy has entertained audiences all across the country for decades. The character, known for his southern drawl, Git-R-Done, and his rapid-fire one-liners, grew out of the comedy mind of Dan Whitney. Now, Dan started doing comedy back in the mid-'80s, and he called radio stations for years, doing different characters on their shows, until a friend booked him for a stand-up comedy routine as one of those characters, Larry the Cable Guy. Well, it took off, and now Larry is a comedy legend. And fans here in Wilmington will now get the chance to see Larry the Cable Guy in person when he performs at the Wilson Center on Friday, April 25th. Dan Whitney, Larry the Cable Guy, welcome to the One-on-One with John Evans podcast, sir.
Well, John, it's good to be on with you. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to heading down there.
You've done stand-up now for almost 40 years, 30 as Larry the Cable Guy. Do you approach your sets in 2025 the same way you did maybe in 1995 or 2005?
First of all, don't remind me. It's been almost 40 years. Holy smokes. You know, I'm the same age now as Angela Lansbury in Murder, She Wrote. That's not a good feeling. Yeah, absolutely. I don't look. I love what I do. I'm a one-liner type comedian. Set up, punch. I enjoy doing it. Makes me laugh. I don't change anything. I mean, I just write different jokes. That's about it. But everything's pretty much. If you saw me on stage at Blue Collar or it's the same kind of stuff. I don't. You know, I know my lane. I don't get popular and then think I can, let me write a bunch of political stuff and change the world. You know, I just want to make people laugh. So I got the same old goofy stuff people have known to come to know me for.
What's the feeling like when you walk on stage now? Do you get that same energy as you did 20, 25 years ago when you first walk out there and hear the applause?
Oh yeah, that's why we do it. It's fun to walk out there. There's no greater feeling than coming up with a joke and then going out and performing that joke and having people laugh at it. It's just a great feeling, you know, knowing that you can write like that and people enjoy what you've written. Yeah, it's great. I think that's why comedians do it for so long, because they just really enjoy it. I mean, I've cut back on my tour schedule because I got older kids now and I'm involved in, I don't want to miss a lot of stuff in their lives as well, but I get to go out. I think I do about 24 dates a year now, and I get to go out and play Star for a couple of weekends and write these jokes. It's fun. Yeah, I enjoy it. It's just as fun as it was back then.
How long did it take you to feel like I'm good at this comedy thing? I know we're going to get into a little bit about how you started and what you did calling into radio shows, but how long did it take you to say, you know, I've got this down. I think I know what it's going to take to make a living doing this?
Well, you know, Steve Martin wrote a book about that, and I read the book, and he's dead on. It takes about 10 years to really come into your own and to feel comfortable and just to kind of hit your stride and hit your lane. So if you're gonna be successful at it, or this is for you, it's gonna take you a good 10 years, just for everything to fall in line and to be comfortable and to be yourself and do what you think is funny. Because a lot of times when you first start, you don't really know what you're doing. You have some jokes and you have favorite comedians. You kind of emulate their styles a little bit. Then next thing you know, throughout the years, your style starts to come through. So yeah, it takes a while. Now there are those rare exceptions where they get on stage and a year later they're popular, you know.
Yeah.
We've had a lot more instances lately. I mean, back in the day when you had like Star Search or the TV game show types where they get up and do their stuff and they can get a mass audience just quickly. But I mean, the better comedians that you know now, the Chris Rocks and the Lenos and the Seinfelds and the Chappelles, it took a while and perfecting and doing all that. So that, yeah, good 10 years.
Where did the desire come from to make people laugh? Dan, I know you grew up on a farm in Nebraska. Your family moved to Florida, but, it was a pig farm, if I'm not mistaken. So were the animals good listeners? I mean, yeah, how did you start it all?
I never knew I would. Look, my brother and sister were hilarious. I guess it just kind of ran in the family, I suppose. It's just my dad was a pastor and a school teacher and a farmer, and so sometimes you knew if there was a little dust up at the house, you didn't want to cross your dad.
Yeah.
And so I've learned timing at a very young age, when to throw out a joke and when not to throw out a joke, and what was going to work and what wasn't going to work. So, it just stems from that. Like I tell everybody, my brother's way funnier than I am, but my brother didn't go into comedy. But my brother was hilarious, and my sister was hilarious, and so it just kind of ran in the family. My mom was kind of funny, and my dad said funny stuff. So I'm the only one that really pursued it, and I got edged along by my friends and told me to go on stage and try to be a comedian, and so I'm the one that pursued it.
You went to Baptist University, went to the University of Nebraska. What was the career plan then? Did you have an idea of what you wanted to do before the comedy thing really kind of unrolled?
I'm from a small town in southeast corner of Nebraska. I grew up on a pig farm. I never went to college in Nebraska. I moved to Florida when I was 15, and I went to college in 2145 Candler Road, Decatur, Georgia, right up from the South Cab Mall. And I went up there. I had no idea what I wanted to do. So my friends went there, and I loved baseball, played baseball in college, thought about maybe being a baseball coach or something like that. But I went home one time just to make some money so I didn't have to get a job. My parents never paid for my college. I paid for my own college, so I had to get a job, and I came and did a summer job so I wouldn't have to work for college. I set out the first half because I just wanted to play baseball. So
Yeah.
I had a good job down in Florida, and then I went on stage, and I really enjoyed getting on stage. So I just never went back to school, and a comedy club opened up in Florida, in West Palm Beach, Florida, and I started going up on stage, and I got hooked. Met a lot of cool comedians that came through at the time. The comedy club, the Comedy Corner, was Rolling Stone magazine had one of the top. Said they were one of the top 5 comedy clubs in the country. So everybody that came through there was the big names, and that's where I met Jeff. I met Foxworthy in 1986 before he was even famous, and we have the same kind of background. We kind of grew up the same, so we hit it off real good. We used to hang out at the Atlanta Braves spring training games.
Yeah,
for
I
2
read that
weeks
story,
here.
yeah.
And it was fun. So that's how I got started right there. And then the whole blue collar, all that came along. I went up to Nashville and I did a show that Jeff was hosting, and that's where he saw me doing the Larry the Cable Guy stuff. And man, we both got a kick out of it, and the rest is history. But that's how that all came to be. I started down there in Florida, and so yeah, it turned out to be pretty good.
You met Jeff long before the Blue Collar Comedy Tour thing, and I know you both like baseball, but do you remember the first joke you told in that first paid gig?
Yeah, I think I went on stage and said I always wanted to be a comedian, but everybody would just laugh at me. I think that might have been it.
You started calling into TV and the radio shows too, wasn't it? And Larry really kind of came out of your calls to some of those radio shows, correct?
Yeah, that's all that started. It was I started doing characters on a radio station in Tampa Bay, and I did several characters, and this one really kind of hit. And I remember I went. My buddy Les McCurdy from McCurdy's Comedy Club in Sarasota billed me as Dan Whitney, aka Larry the Cable Guy, and it kind of irritated me because my act, it was totally different than the stage because Larry the Cable Guy, I wanted to create like a character kind of like for just people that I grew up and had been around, because I've been around hog farmers and sale barns and cattle farmers and rodeo folks, and so I wanted to create like a nice likable Archie Bunker type character that was, that's what I created. But on the radio, the bit was all political commentaries about what's going on in the country, and
Yeah.
of course, there was a little bit. I went by the Howard Stern School of Radio, where you have to make a little tiny point. That you do have to make a little point in what you're talking about, but it is surrounded and shrouded in shock and things where people go, I can't believe he said that. I got to tune in next week, see what else this guy says.
Yeah.
So, but all my stuff was pretty just nonsensical. So I created that. But anyway, he billed me as that, and I was kind of mad because I told him that was just for radio. But I went on stage and people started yelling out Get-R-Done and all that stuff. So I kind of dipped down into the character, and he came up to me and he said, you ever thought about doing your whole show like that? And I said, no, I never have thought about it. But he said, well, I'm going to take your real name off. I'll just leave Larry the Cable Guy up. So I went and changed and put on what I drove over in. I drove over in a Trans Am with T-tops and a pair of Wranglers, lace-up riding ropers, a cut-off Nebraska T-shirt and a NASCAR hat. That's what I drove over in, so I ain't faking it. And I went up and for the first time I did my show like that. And so I just kind of took my regular act and just tweaked it for the character. But I think the funny thing about it was when I was first time on Jimmy Kimmel, a long time ago, before he turned into a nut, I went. He leaned over at the break and he said, you and I kind of got started the same way. And I said, how's that? He says, well, when you were doing characters on 95 YNF in Tampa, I was doing call-in characters across the street at a station called the Power Pig. I go, get out of here. So him and I were both sitting on the phone doing characters on different stations. And so that's what we had in common. So you never know who does what or how they got started or what led to whatever it is they did. But for me and him, that's how we kind of got our start doing characters.
But you, if I'm correct here, you only got paid for a couple of stations that you called into. I mean, you busted it and gave a lot of radio stations kind of free stuff for a while until the Larry persona developed, correct?
Yeah, well, if you know anything about radio stations, that's like pulling teeth to get them to pay you to do anything.
Yeah. Well, back then it was, you're right.
That was always the big joke, they would cut some jock's pay and they would fire two people because they couldn't afford them, and then the next day they're giving away $1,000 every 2 hours to listeners. It's like, well, you could have gave that to the people working there. But that's what I did. I figured if I was doing that at just that one place from listening to me on the radio, the more radio stations I got, the more I could develop a following. So I just started going into radio stations where I was working, and they would ask me, what is this thing you're doing on these morning shows? And then the next thing they would say, boy, we'd love to have that, but we just can't afford to pay anybody else. They wouldn't let us pay anybody. And I go, well, you don't got to pay me. They go, what do you mean we don't got to pay you? I said, I'll tell you what, I guarantee you that it'll get popular and you can get a sponsor for it at some point. Right. All I ask is that you promote me as a radio station night at a comedy club, bring me in for a weekend, and so it was a win-win situation. They advertised me for free on the station. Comedy club didn't have to advertise because I was coming in, and I ended up getting about 27 radio stations, and I started doing it all across the country. I did it on I got on some other syndicated ones like John Boy and Billy
Right.
and
Bob and Tom. Yeah.
Bob and Tom and Ron. So I was on a lot of. So it really helped me out. But I worked at it. It's not like I sat on my laurels. You know, I had to come up with a commentary about something every morning. So every morning, I think the most I would do in a morning is maybe six. I would do six on a Monday. I would do four on a Tuesday. I'd do six on a Wednesday, five on a. So I would get them all in. Some of them were 2 days a week. Some of them were one day a week. It just depended on when they wanted them. But it took me, and then I started doing those call-ins in the early '90s, and I finally gave up my last station. I remember saying I couldn't do it anymore because I get too busy. About 2003. So,
Right.
yeah, a little over about 10 years I was doing those, and it really paid off. Of course, it led to the Blue Collar, and it led to the Cars movies, and so you just never know. That's why I always tell people,
Yep.
you never,
And
especially in this business, you never know. You just work hard. You take advantage of every opportunity, regardless of if they're paying you good or not paying you good. If you got nothing to do, don't be lazy. Just show up and do something, because you never know who's going to be in the audience or what it's going to lead to.
yeah, and that's the kind of the work ethic I've had doing TV news now for 42 years. I've always felt I wasn't as good as somebody else doing something, so I had to outwork them. And I get that sense that you kind of felt you were plowing your own ground and outworking people to lay the foundation for your future.
Absolutely. You know, I learned that too from Foxworthy. When we were hanging out, Foxworthy always said it's called show business for a reason. There's the show part, but you can't do the show part unless you bust it on the business part, because the business part's the main part of it. you
Yeah.
know, and you got to show up and do the show. So, absolutely, you definitely have to work at it.
Do you remember when you got the call to join Blue Comedy? And what was that call like?
Yeah, no, I was really busting it out. I was one of the top draws at comedy clubs across the country, and I finally got a weekend off. I think I had been out for 6 straight weeks, and I was home, and I was on Butler Chain of Lakes bass fishing with my buddy Greg. And then I got a phone call that said they were doing a show hosted by Jeff Foxworthy and Andy Griffith at Ryman Auditorium, called The History of Country Comedy, and they needed one more person. They need 10 guys, so they need one more. You were suggested, and I'm like, man, I just got home. I just got out here fishing. When is it? It's tomorrow. I'm like, oh man. All right. So I was fishing on Friday, and then they said, oh, by the way, you're the only one that's not getting paid. But they don't have the budget, but they will put you up for the night. So
Okay.
I got a plane ticket, and here's the reason. I said, well, I haven't seen Jeff in a while because he's been so busy. This is the height of his popularity.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen Jeff in a while. And it's the Ryman Auditorium, the Mother Church of Country Music, the original one. Always wanted to work there. I'm a big old country fan. So I did it. I did it just to go say hi to Jeff, and I did it to do the Ryman, because I thought in my head, well, you never know, it might be somebody's Ryman. Maybe the judge will take me out on tour with her. I didn't know. So I went up there, and they broke it into 2 shows, and I just had a great show. And Jeff came up, and we were laughing because he was like, "Man, this is like so funny. This is some of this stuff." Because Jeff and I used to sit at the Brave spring training games, and we would riff off each other just to be fun. And Jeff and I still do that. Like, we'd sit at the Braves games, and Jeff would just lean over, at the end of the inning. He'd go, "Hey, did Connie bring that potato salad over?" over to the church last week because my stomach really felt. I go, yeah, you know what? She left that out, and then we told her, and we literally would riff for 5 minutes just on some stupid thing we made up. So he came in, and we were laughing because it reminded him of my show, reminded him of when we used to riff like that. But after that was over, they were looking for a person for the Blue Collar Comedy Tour to fill in. I think they'd already done a few shows, and the guy they had wasn't blue collar enough. They were looking for somebody else. And Jeff said, hey, man, we got to get Larry up here. We got to get Dan up here. I think it's going to fit in real good with us. And it did. Went up and I auditioned a couple nights. And, of course, I think they already had it made up in their mind that they were going to have me on there. But it worked really good for Blue Collar because I was completely different. You know,
Yeah.
I was not a storyteller. Ron White's one of the greatest storytellers of all time, and Jeff, and he's one of the greatest storytellers with his "You Might Be a Redneck" stuff.
Yeah.
And Engvall was kind of, a Frank Sinatra type. He had his, but they were all storytellers, but different kind of storytellers. And I wasn't. I was a one-liner comedian. So the thing that made that work, where we sat out on stools at the end and just told stories, it worked really well because we didn't really need much of segueing, because as soon as somebody's done with a story, something would remind me. I'd have a one-liner for something that was in that story, and I'd pop out 2, 3, 4 one-liners that had nothing to do with what anybody else was talking about. The first joke would probably tie into what somebody said, and I'd do, and then we'd move. It just worked really good. It was kind of like if you're laying brick, you need to put the cement in between the bricks, and I was kind of like that cement in between the joke bricks.
And with Blue Collar, and then Lord, I Apologize going gold, and then the movie sells 4 million DVDs, Git-R-Done DVD goes platinum, the book is a bestseller, you get a Grammy nomination, Billboard Awards, several things, interviews that you have done. I have seen that with everything that happened after Blue Collar Comedy Tour started, you say that Mater and Pixar, you've called that your biggest break, which is amazing to me because of everything that you had done and accomplished before then.
Well, I say it's my biggest break because from my career, from when I first started doing the voice and the character, I did it and I never knew where it would lead to, and I worked really hard at it, and it led to the culmination of that voice. I specifically got hired because of the voice. It matched what John Lasseter wanted for his tow truck. And why I say it's one of the greatest things is because I have kids, and these movies are huge.
Yeah.
And they're like, when I'm long gone and my wife's long gone and my kids are in their 50s and 60s and they got kids, they'll always hear me. I'll always be on something like that. And it was like a total godsend. And not only that, but it brought a whole nother generation of people into what I do. So it was kind of cool. It's kind of like what Eddie Murphy did. Eddie Murphy did these things that kids couldn't even watch. Because if you were a family, you wouldn't have your little kids watching Eddie Murphy comedy special, but you can watch Eddie Murphy do all these cartoon things and all these goofy movies. So it's kind of like that. It was just me kind of showing that I could do all kinds of different things and not just one thing. So when that came along, I really enjoyed it. And it's not that kids couldn't watch what I did in my stand-up. My stand-up has progressed and it evolved ever since I got a wife and kids. I had to incorporate them in my stand-up act, obviously. So when I first started, I didn't have a wife and I didn't have kids, and anything goes. But when you have kids, your perspective on things change.
Sure.
On how you present your material.
Yeah.
And so I look back on some of those things and some of those jokes, and were they funny? Yeah, they were funny. I mean, I don't take them back, but now that I got kids and my life is in a different spot, you go, oh man, I wish I wouldn't have done that thing.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I regret doing. I regret doing. Now, I'm glad I did it because it led to some of this. But so kids give you a totally different perspective. So when Cars came along, it was great. It was great for all families. It's not woke. It's just a fun cartoon that adults can enjoy as well.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was. It's the greatest thing that I was very blessed and very thankful that that came along.
And I think before we started here today, I told you that in our newsroom, folks that are my age and some of the older, let's call them experienced people in the newsroom, know Larry the Cable Guy from the stand-up comedy, but some of our younger reporters, 23, 24, when I said, I'm interviewing Larry the Cable Guy, they said, who? And I said, the guy who did Mater. They said, you're interviewing Mater? Oh my gosh. It's that generational thing that I think Cars just crossed over and gave you a whole new audience.
Oh, absolutely. And it's like there's no greater feeling than getting on stage and telling a joke and people laugh and you wrote the joke. But I'll tell you what's really cool is when you walk around and you see some guy and he's got an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and he notices me and he goes, "Hey, Larry, what's going on?" I go, "Hey, man." He'll go, "Get her done." I'll go, "Get her done." He'll go, and the kids are just standing there and goes, "Hey, kids, you know who that is?" And they get kind of staring at me, and they go, "That's Mater from Cars." And then they kind of look like, "What?" And then I'll look at them and go, "Woo-hoo! Boy, I tell you what, I'm happier than a tornado in a trailer park." And they just light up. They start laughing. I mean, to me, it doesn't get any better than that.
Can you remember at any time when it hit you how big Larry had gotten? I mean, was it an appearance somewhere or that somebody recognized your voice? But there had to be some place where you went, whoa, this is going a lot bigger than I thought it might.
You know what's really funny? At the time, we were so busy. We were on tour buses and working arenas, and then we'd leave and go to the next town. And I didn't have a chance to kind of soak it in. I'll tell you when I realized, holy mackerel, that was amazing. I'll tell you what that was. It was probably within the last year and a half when I'm sitting at home and I'm just hanging out and I'm following my friend Nate Bargatze.
Yeah.
Nate Bargatze is unbelievable. And watching his show, and he's doing the show at the arena, and people are there and they're packed. And I thought to myself, holy mackerel. I did all that.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize until I see it from the outside looking in how big it was. And so, no, I didn't really realize it till about 2 years ago. Because you're so involved and so busy and doing this and that and that and that. You didn't have a chance to really, and going back to Steve Martin's book, Steve Martin said that too. He wished his stand-up career he would have enjoyed more.
Yeah.
Because he would go do the thing. They'd rush him out. He'd go in the hotel. That'd be it. He didn't get to do anything, and he wished that he would have taken it in. And I didn't. Yeah. Now that I see Nate and some of the guys doing this, it's like, holy mackerel, I can't believe I did that. I didn't even realize that it was that huge. I had no idea. I will say, towards the last of my arena tours, I still do a few. There's still a few places I can do an arena. I'm back into theaters, which is perfectly fine with me.
Yeah.
The less pressure. But I remember, I started doing arenas in 2003, and I think my last arena tour, where it was all arenas, was like 2000, I don't know, 14, 15, 16, somewhere in there. I remember I did in 2010, Brad Paisley, and I had a cigar after the premiere of Cars 2. And we were talking about that, how it's just a whirlwind. And he says what they do is they'll what he said the same thing. He didn't really enjoy it. And then he said what they started doing was going up to the top of the arena, and they got permission, and they'd go to the top of the arena and they'd smoke a cigar and they'd watch them break the stage down and talk about, holy mackerel, can you believe that we
that's cool. That's really neat.
And so I think we started doing that towards the end of those tours about probably 4 years later. That those next 4 years, that's what we would do. We would go up and enjoy watching them break it apart. So
that's cool.
It's crazy. That whole time was a whirlwind. Very thankful for it, but I wouldn't trade what I got now for anything, and that's being with my family and still being able to go out and do some stuff and have a good time and still selling out shows. I love it. I love that people still love my humor. And every time I show up, it's like a family reunion, except we got a roof and nobody's kissing my sister.
Are you always workshopping? Because I cut the grass this morning, and as I was doing that, I was thinking, how am I going to ask him this question? How would I ask Larry this question? What about you? Doing the dishes. Are you thinking of jokes? All that stuff.
Doing the dishes itself is a joke. Like, I'm 62 years old now. I mean, my wife asked me to take the trash out the other day, and I looked at her. I'm like, "What do you want me to have a heart attack? What, take out the trash? You kidding me? You can't exert any physical labor in here. You'll kill me." I always am. Yeah, and you know what? I just did a brand new special. And it'll air probably in about 5 months. I have no idea when. I'm not allowed to announce what it's on, but it's a great place. And anyway, I wasn't going to do another special. I'd done enough specials. And then I looked. I had to do an hour. I had about 28 minutes that no one has heard on an album or CD. And so I said, yeah, I'll do it. And I went through my notes. And I couldn't believe how much stuff that I had written down that I wanted to try out. So that's what I did. I just kind of took a sheet of paper and see what joke went with this joke can go with that joke, and I wrote out a set, and then I went up to the local comedy club here in Nebraska, and I took some nights, and it was a Larry the Cable Guy night, and I just went up, hung out with the crowd, and worked out material. And so, that's actually when I come down there, that's what I'll be doing. I'll be doing my brand new special, and I'm looking forward to it. You're always, when you're a comedian, I think that your head just works that way. You'll hear something funny, you'll think of something funny for it, then you write it down. Even if I'm only doing 5 dates a year, I will always be writing stuff down and workshopping it, and I'll give it to somebody else. Just so I really enjoy. It's kind of like Johnny. Johnny Carson said, even though he's retired, he's still going to write some jokes and send them to Letterman and see if he likes them. So,
something intriguing to me is you also have a record label, Git-R-Done Records, and to me, it seems like you're helping out younger artists with some of those getting started facets of their career, much like maybe you were helped out early in your career. Is that important to you now at 62?
Well, absolutely. And, there's a lot of comedians out there that are funny and they just don't have the right resources, or they just don't have the right manager, or they're not seen by a lot of people. And a lot of them are friends of mine. So I just ask them, hey, you want to get on my record label? Because we'll play you on, we'll get you some airplay on Sirius. And so it's really helped some guys out. There's, like, I got a buddy of mine who's really funny, Tim the Dairy Farmer. His name's Tim the Dairy Farmer. And all he does is he does a ton of farm conventions. He's the comic. And he's funny. And so, people would think, wow, but he's a really funny guy. So I put him on my label, and it gives him some good extra money for the year, and gets his name out there a little bit. So I like doing that. I like signing people up and having a label. And there's a few people doing that. I know that Nate does that a lot, and Jeff does a few. And it's always nice to have somebody that's got a big, so like if I was a comedian and I was just coming up and I'm doing okay, but I want to be seen by more people. I mean, if there was a comedian that had a lot of popularity and had a big social media presence, want to put me on a record label and list them on, yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Every little bit helps if you're a comedian, and it's really fun to be able to take guys that you know already that are funny and help and put them on a label and help them out. Absolutely.
And your philanthropic organization, the foundation, has just done tremendous work. So a huge salute to you, not just for helping out the next generation of comedians, but for helping the hospital in Orlando, Florida, the Child Advocacy Center there in Nebraska. Your foundation, you and your wife, Kara, have done tremendous work with that.
Well, thank you. Like I said, we've been blessed, and we have unbelievable crowds, and that's always a fun part of it as well. Look, I like helping people. I like doing things that help, and I'm able to do that. So I should do that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Once again, Larry the Cable Guy will perform at the Wilson Center in Wilmington Friday, April the 25th. There are still a couple of tickets left. I'll put a link inside this story on our website where you can look and get yourself a ticket and see the man who is an American success story, Larry the Cable Guy, coming here to Wilmington. Larry, I appreciate you taking the time today. I know you're really busy. Thanks for being on the One-on-One with John Evans podcast.
Yeah, John, I appreciate it, and hope everybody comes out and see me, and I guarantee you will laugh from the minute I talk till the minute I leave. And we're going to get her done.
A big thank you to Dan Whitney and Larry the Cable Guy for joining us for this podcast episode. You can keep up with everything he's doing. It's really easy. LarryTheCableGuy.com. And there are a few tickets left for his performance here in Wilmington on Friday, April 25th. I've put a link inside this story on our website where you can try to get one. Now, before we go, I'd like to ask you a favor. Please follow or subscribe to the One-on-One with John Evans podcast on whatever app you use to listen to your favorite shows. And if you would be so kind, please leave us a rating or a review. We really do care what you think of our interviews, and the more feedback we have from friends like you, the higher we'll be listed on the apps, the better chance we'll have of bringing in more new listeners. I'm John Evans. Appreciate you joining us for this episode of One-on-One.